Every fight went back to the wedding. All right, in other words, these families, I said to them, how do you know when a fight ends in your family? And that told me whether or not they had a pattern of reconciliation. What were the clues? And I asked them individually, so they weren't together, and they would say the same thing. For example, a very common answer was, everybody comes out of their room. Another common answer was, Mom says, anybody wants something to eat? You know, good old food. But the two little boys that I love, 4 and 5, separately said this. And I said, how do you know when a fight ends in your family? They said, well, Dad gives a big yawn and says, well. Can't you see that? It's a scene in a horrible cooling down period, and then he says, well. Now, what he's doing is beautiful because he's modeling closure for those kids, and they recognized it. Okay. Moving from communication, I want to just mention on the second one, which is affirms and supports. In the healthy family, everyone does some affirming and supporting, as opposed to the family where perhaps Mom is the sole source of affirmation and nobody affirms her. They also distinguish between support and pressure. Put yourself back to your last Little League game. Some parents support, some parents pressure. And the only difference that we can teach is pressure is when children perceive it as pressure. And you can say something to one child and it's perceived as support. You can say it to another child in your family, it's perceived as pressure. So we have to know our children well enough to know the difference. Moving on to teaches respect, I want to just mention one thing here. Respects individual differences. When we say that to parents, very often they'll say, oh, we do. Everybody doesn't have to be an athlete or doesn't have to be a scholar. What goes way beyond that, it means accepting the design, basic design of the child, instead of trying to change them. I'll use a homely example here. Most families have a combination of morning grouches and morning sunbeams, right? Okay. Let's say you have a family with 3 sunbeams and a grouch. Now, you can look at that grouch as either a discipline problem that you're going to change, which you're not, right? Or you can look at it and say, that's his way. Now, who here is a morning grouch? Is there anybody? Are you? Can I use you? Yeah. Okay. Will you be grouchy? Yeah. Okay. I'm your mother. Hi, honey. What's wrong?
Nothing.
Well, something must be wrong.
No.
Look, we want you to smile in this family. We're happy at breakfast. Okay. Now, the point is, if she moved across the street and there was a family there with 3 grouches and a sunbeam, who's the problem? The sunbeam, which gives validity to the saying that every child would be a success in some family. You know, and sometimes we should just move them around. But the point is, we are accepting the basic makeup. What do you want done with you in the morning?
I just want people to leave me alone.
Leave me alone. Leave her alone. Walk around her first. She'll wake up at 11 and start smiling, and she'll be going tonight when we're grouchy. Okay? So that's a basic kind of what I'm talking about on individual differences. I would like to move up to number 8, which is the healthy family has a strong sense of kinship with lots of traditions. Remember Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof, traditions? Traditions are so important in families that one of the most volatile arguments couples get into the first year of marriage does not have to do with money. You're nodding already. What is it?
Where are you going to go on
Christmas. Where are we going to spend Christmas? Or do you open the gifts on Christmas Eve or on Christmas morning? Do you have a real tree or an artificial tree? You put it up on Christmas Eve or Halloween? You talk to people. I'll meet people who've been married 10 years and they will admit they do not remember their first Christmas together pleasurably or fondly. And I'll say, why? You're brighter than that. Why was that so important? And they'll say, because that's the way it was supposed to be. What they were saying is that's the way we did it. Now, healthy couples take some traditions from each, drop some, add some of their own, and that's what makes them unique in the family. Another thing about traditions in families is even if you come from a tradition-less family without many traditions, it's easy for healthy families to initiate traditions because to a child, once is a tradition. You do something that the child likes. Have you ever heard your child say, we always do it that way? And you think, what have we started? You know, but that's the child's way of saying to you, this met a need. And it means repeat it and give me more of it. Now, your child isn't going to come out and say, I have this deep psychological need for this other thing. But when they say we always do it that way, pay attention to it. And look at your traditions. Another thing about traditions is healthy families tend to duplicate traditions even if they don't like them. It's amazing how many people eat things on Christmas Eve in this country that they don't like. When I was on book tour, people would call in, and I'll say to them, well, why do you do it if you don't like it? And they'll say, because it's Christmas. In other words, the tradition that carries on. Another part of kinship is healthy families tell their story to their children, not just their story, but their parents' and ancestor forebears' stories. They take them back to where, this is where I grew up. This is where I went to school. This is where I got in trouble. They take them to the cemetery. One of my dearest memories is my husband's parents taking our children, and we kind of, my husband and I, Jim and I, wandered back, and the parents taking the children to tombstones and saying, now this was your Uncle Peter, he was the one who, and so on. One of the nicest gifts those of you who are grandparents can do is write some stories and things about your past for your grandchildren, or tape them. Family has been defined as a group of people who share a history and a future, and sometimes we do a lot better job on the future than the history. Giving our children a sense of bondedness and connectedness, really important. Also, these families accept their strange one. Every family has a character, a weirdo, if you will. Maybe you are yours, I don't know. But anyway, you know the one I mean. It's the one you don't introduce your spouse to until you're well married. All right. Some families, if you are weird, if you don't conform, you are not a member of the family. Families who are healthy say, he's weird, but he's ours. He's kin, is the phrase that's often used. And the moving from number 8 in traditions, I'd like to talk about number 10 and the shared religious core. Because I did say earlier you can have a strong marriage and family life in an interfaith marriage. A shared religious core means a belief pattern that gives meaning to life. It answers those age-old questions. Who am I? Why am I here? Why am I doing all this? Why are we a family? It's a basic belief. Now, it does not necessarily mean it's a shared denominational belief or shared religious habits belief. But it is a core that gives meaning to life. Now, all of my groups, including the social workers and psychologists, said the families we see that are healthy have a shared religious core. So I was really interested in why, and what I found out is this. If you don't have something that gives meaning to life, if you don't have something to answer those questions, we tend to seek it elsewhere. And where does a family tend to seek happiness and meaning if they don't have it supplied by a belief? Yes?
In materialism?
In materialism. In other words, in the good life. We're not very happy, so we're going to buy something that will make us happy. And it works this way. We're not getting along very well together, we're not very happy, but we will be happy if we get another car, or another bathroom, or 9 television sets. Okay, so it does give a meaning to life. Just naming it gives a sense of bonding. Waiting and working toward it gives a sense of bonding. Getting it and enjoying it gives a sense of purpose. But then what happens? The novelty wears off, and you have to identify another object that's going to make you happy to give meaning to your life, and we become what the federal government calls us, which is a consumer unit. And we get on that consumer kind of trail. A woman, to show you an example of how this affects us, mother said to me, most incredible statement. She said, we're not getting along very well together, so we're thinking of getting a camper. A camper? I don't even want a camper if we're getting along real well together. That's my bias. But in talking with her, I discovered that she was saying this because she wanted, they were buying into the commercials on the Camper family. Now let's talk about the commercials on the Camper family. What kind of weather is it? Sunny and beautiful. What are the children like? Perfect. Clean and not fighting, right? Are there mosquitoes? Is it raining? Is Mom scouring the fry pan with sand? No. In other words, the message was coming through to her, if we get that, we'll be like that family. And that really impacts us today. And the fact is, if you're not getting along very well together and you get a camper and go to the mountains or wherever you go in that camper, you're not going to get along any better together. But she was buying into that. So that's where a shared religious core gives a meaning to life outside of the acquisition of things to make us happy. Moving on to number 11, which is a sense of privacy. It doesn't mean just not getting into people's mail or drawers or listening in on their phone conversation. It means allowing people to be who they are, giving them some space, allowing them to be the age they are. Her mother said to me once, I said to my daughter, Susie, you're acting like a 4-year-old. And she said, I am 4. Is it all right to act like a 4-year-old if you're 4? How about if you're a 40-year-old, must you always act and look like you're 25 till you're 60? Which is what we do in our society a lot. One of my least favorite commercials is that one where the man says, isn't she wonderful? She looks like she did the day we were married. I think I'll keep her. Who wants him? That's not good mental health. Look at her sense of security. If I change, he won't keep me, kind of thing. So in privacy, it means accepting people the age they are. Some parents will say to their kids, you're not going to act like those other teenagers. That's denying them their age in the society. Okay, moving on to number 13, which is fosters table time and conversation. Briefly talk about that. Families that are healthy tend to value table time once a day. Today, many families have gotten into what I call the microwave meal, which is they put the food out, people come home at different times, fill their plate, put it in the microwave, and take it to TV. And many, many families do not eat together more than one meal a week. And when you don't eat together, you don't communicate. Have you ever found yourself with a series of notes on the kitchen table, passing, and you haven't seen each other? These families tend to look at their schedule and say, look, we haven't eaten together. How are we going to find time? Who can move this meeting? Who can miss that? Who can come late from practice or whatever it is? But it's not just enough being there. What goes on around that table is important too. If it's just a place to dump, people don't want to be there. For example, some families get into the habit of complaining. The ain't it awful? Well, you think that was bad. You ought to have seen the freeway. Well, yeah, but yeah. And it goes on, and after a while, you don't even want to eat together. So then one of the things that healthy families tend to do is look at the quality of their family life and table life as well as just being there. And as I said earlier, they don't use television or listen to television. Ever tried to talk to a child who was watching television? The body is there, but the spirit's elsewhere. It's that empty house thing. And we really need to teach children how to communicate. We need to teach them how to disagree and enjoy each other. And we can do this during family meals. And one family told me that they had gotten into a really bad habit of complaining. The whole family meal was turned around to complaining. And they made a policy that at the beginning of every meal, the first thing everyone had to say was something good that happened to them during the day. Then you could go on complaining. But you had to say something good happened to me. And the mother said to me, her son said, well, the best thing that happened to me is this dinner sure looks a lot better than last night's. You lose some and you lose some, as Bill Cosby says. All right. And finally, we go to number 15, and that is, again, the healthy family admits to problems and seeks help. And it does not see itself as a perfect family. It knows that when you have problems, you can still be healthy. Now, what I want you to do with this, and those of you at home, what I want you to do with this is to make a conscious effort to start focusing on which of these strengths you have, so that when a stress arises, you can deal with them. You reach for the strength. For example, perhaps your strength would be a sense of play and humor. I guess you would have that, do you? Okay. That's what you would reach for then when you have a stress. Let's say you're having a stress of time or money or children's behavior or something. If you can use your sense of play and humor to deal with it, you're using your top tool. Maybe your strength is a shared religious core. If it's that, then you can use that to deal with it. Or a sense of family bonding. But you can't use it, you see, if you don't know what they are. So that's why we have to go back. In a sense of play and humor, one thing I found on families that use humor, while they use it positively, not destructively. How do you use humor destructively other than the put down I mentioned earlier? What's another way of using humor destructively in a family? How about teasing? Or how about ridicule or sarcasm? All of those are negative ways, but if you're using it that way, you've got the humor, all you have to do is turn it around and use it positively. A lot of situations are diffused by use of humor. I found with families, and think about this with your own family, I found with families that when healthy families that use humor well tend to value those wonderful little family phrases that don't mean anything to anyone outside of the family. If somebody were sitting there listening to you, they couldn't decode it because it comes from some situation. Very often, if you can use that, you can use it effectively and not have to deal specifically with the problem. I haven't told any stories about my family now, and I will ask my son to forgive me for putting him on a public view, but it's a neat story, and he's a neat kid. When he was about 9, and he's a sunny kind of kid, he came to breakfast one morning, and I said to him, "Good morning," and he said, "I don't have any socks that match." That was his greeting. Well, I know the nesting habits of his socks, so I didn't get defensive, and I said to him, "Oh, that's too bad. You know, if you sympathize with him, that's one way of dealing with it." So he went to the table and he said, "Brown toast again?" And I let that one pass. Actually, I hadn't had my coffee, and I didn't feel he was responsible till I did. And then when he got up and he failed to clear his place, which we always do, and I said, "Oh, Dan, you forgot to clear your place." And he said, "I don't know why I have to work so hard around here." By then I'd had it, and I looked at him and I said, "I'm not enjoying you very much today, young man." And with genuine astonishment, he looked up at me and he said, "Boy, you're sure in a bad mood this morning." Well, what was he doing? He was doing what we all do. When you're in a bad mood, you try to find someone to put it on, right? And when he came home after school, we laughed about it. And I asked him if we could share that table, and he said yes. And it has become a coined phrase. When anyone's trying to put their bad mood or guilt load on someone else, we say, "Boy, you're sure in a bad mood this morning." And it says, "I know what you're doing." You don't have to deal with the issue at hand. So make use of those wonderful little coin phrases in your family. How did you do? Are you stronger than you felt you were? Have you got a lot of those qualities? Can you name which ones you have? And you at home, can you name your strengths? That's your assignment. To go out of here looking at what's right about us instead of what's wrong. And in closing, I would like to share with you some words of Irma Bombeck, as I recall them, on parenting. And she compared children to kites. She said, "You spend a lifetime trying to get them off the ground, and you run with them till you're both breathless. And they crash, and you pull them out of the spout. And finally they're airborne, but you got to keep letting out more string. And you keep letting it out, and the kite becomes more distant. And you know that someday it's going to snap that line that bound you together and fly as it was meant to fly, free and alone. Only then do we know that we did our job." Isn't that a lovely analogy? And thank you for your attention, and enjoy your healthy family.